Hi, friends. Today we are going to talk about decision making, its pitfalls and traps. I'm going to help you to take better decisions. And we are going to do this by learning from the experiences of people who were entrusted with the task of taking momentous decisions in history. The rulers, military commanders, business tycoons, all of whom were all leaders and had enormous power and responsibility in their time. The specific cases we will study will be those which ended up in disasters. These decisions resulted in abject defeat in the battlefield, loss of empires, incalculable loss of human life, catastrophic failures, and loss of image. It is easy and a bit unfair to criticize in hindsight the decisions taken in a specific context. Yet, it is instructive to study the mistakes made earlier so that we may learn something which we can use when we face critical decisions of our own lives. You all take decisions every day. Some are very big, having life-altering potential, like choosing whom to marry or deciding to start a new business. Others are relatively small, like where to spend your next vacation. But taking decisions is unavoidable as long as you live. Even the decision not to take a decision is also a decision. Decision making is basically choosing between a set of alternatives. You may choose wisely, rationally, and deliberately, or you may choose recklessly, casually, and without considering all the important information on alternatives at your disposal. The outcome of your decisions depends a great deal on the process by which you make choices, and it has been the constant endeavor of scholars and researchers to improve the process. Countless researchers have applied their minds to this phenomenon and come up with several theories of decision making. These theories have been applied by the practitioners of management and public policy with varying degree of success. Some have stood the test of time, while others have vanished. It is seen that some approaches emphasize the importance of rationality, consider all alternatives, have complete information about the likely consequences of choosing a given alternative, and then make a perfect choice. However, it is now a settled fact that irrational forces and psychological biases play an important role in decision making. People are tied to their mental sets, and their actions usually follow a pattern dictated by their psychological frame of mind. With this knowledge, let us explore some historical cases of decisions which resulted in disasters and see what caused them to fail and lessons that they can have for us. Hitler's defeat at the hands of Soviet Union during World War II. During the early phase of the Second World War, Nazi Germany had stunning military victories. Almost the entire Europe had capitulated to Nazi forces. However, the invasion of Soviet Union was a turning point of the Second World War. After penetrating deep inside the Soviet territory, the hitherto invincible Nazi army met its moment of truth in Stalingrad. The unfavorable weather and the stiff resistance of Soviets apparently was not taken into account by Hitler. Hitler lost badly and ended up losing the war subsequently. But why did Hitler take the decision of invading Soviet Russia? Was he not knowing the difficulties that the onset of Russian winters would pose to his advancing army? There were many factors actually. But the most important to me was that the confidence of Hitler in his success against Soviet army was placed, or rather misplaced, on another development which had happened before the start of Operation Barbarossa. It was the Winter War, which was fought between the Soviet Union and Finland during 1939 and 1940. It resulted in more than 100,000 Soviet soldiers dead and 200,000 Soviet soldiers wounded. Though the Soviet Union ultimately triumphed in gaining control of the eastern territory of Finland, it exposed the inefficiency of the Red Army to the world. If a small and weak country like Finland could cause such great difficulty to the Soviet army, then what chance did the latter have against a much superior and tactically sound German force? The humiliation of Soviet Union at the hand of such a small power convinced Hitler that Soviet Union would totter when German invasion begins. He declared in June 1941 that we have only to kick the door and the whole rotten structure would come crashing down. Hitler invaded Soviet Union with all its might. Though it got initial successes, but the war got extended as the German army received stiff resistance. The long supply chain was getting hard for the Germans to maintain, and ultimately the encirclement and surrender of German troops led by Field Marshal Friedrich Wilhelm Paulus at Stalingrad marked the beginning of the end of the Third Reich. Thus, it can be seen that Hitler grossly underestimated his adversary and ignored the forces of nature and extent of Soviet resistance that could thwart his well-laid plans. As mentioned before, Russian humiliation in the Winter War against Finland was one important historical development that convinced him of the success of his ill-conceived mission. The important lesson for decision making that can be learned here is that there can be a certain event that may work towards reinforcing a certain belief in us about the future outcomes of our actions. But the future is inherently uncertain and unpredictable. Hitler's own notions of its own superiority and the Slavic inferiority create a unique bias in his thinking that increased his susceptibility towards giving a certain meaning to the Soviet-Finland Winter War. Ask yourself whether you are interpreting a certain event or development or a piece of information in a particular way because of confirmatory bias. Don't be fooled by a single event. Look at the whole picture. Constantly ask yourself, am I believing in something because I want to believe that way? The fiasco of the Third Battle of Panipat. Marathas were a powerful fighting race based in present-day Maharashtra region of India who had ambitions of dominating large parts of India. They were eminently successful in the battles they fought because of their valor, fighting skills, and guerrilla warfare tactics which they employed. However, in the latter half of the 18th century, their expansion was challenged by the Afghan invader Ahmad Shah Abdali, who captured large parts of North and Northwest India from the Marathas. In order to meet this threat, the Marathas sent a large expeditionary force under their able commander Sadashiv Rao. The armies of Marathas and Afghans met at a place called Panipat and fought one of the bloodiest battles of Indian history. It resulted in the defeat of Marathas, and as a consequence of this battle, the Marathas were weakened and eliminated from the contest of supremacy of India, which paved the way for the British rule of India. The Marathas were led by Sadashiv Rao, a brave and competent commander who had earlier proved his mettle in the war against the Nizam of Hyderabad. However, the Marathas committed a grave error of judgment which contributed immensely to their defeat against the Afghans. What they did was that they had brought a large number of non-combatants, which included a lot of women and children, to the battlefield. It looks a strange decision today. Why did they bring them at all? The reason was that when the Maratha army was moving out of Confederate headquarters in Pune to cover a long march to North India to meet Afghan forces, a lot of people joined them as they wanted to visit the Hindu pilgrimage centers in North India. They thought that being with the army would ensure their safety during the journey. The non-combatants also included the wives and children of senior commanders. But why was this fatal decision taken by the Marathas to allow them to be with the army? The exact reasons are not known. But the end result was that Marathas mixed their goals, and these goals were also mutually inconsistent. Having a large number of non-combatants with the army put an unbearable logistical burden on the Marathas. They were unable to feed everyone, and the soldiers and animals were starving just before the Battle of Panipat began. Having pilgrims and going to pilgrimage centers undermined the central Maratha goal of winning the war, which was a matter of life and death for them. The lesson to be learned is that be clear about the goals that you want to achieve. All the goals should be mutually consistent. Be ruthless to say no, and don't take any extra burden that would undermine your central goal. The nano disaster. Tata Motors is a top automobile manufacturing company based in India. It is involved in the production of a diversified range of cars, SUVs, trucks, buses, etc. In 2008, the group, under the leadership of Ratan Tata, launched the production of a relatively inexpensive rear-engined hatchback intended to appeal to Indian consumers who did not possess a car and were using scooters and motorcycles. The car was also marketed that way with full gusto. Marketing strategy of Tata Nano was also fundamentally influenced by the belief that a lower middle class Indian family which did not possess a family car, would love to shift to a four-wheeler if it came at an affordable price, as this shift would mark a sea change as far as their social status was concerned. Ratan Tata, the chairman of the group, in an event to mark the launch of Nano in his speech said that today's story of Nano started when he observed Indian families riding on two-wheelers. Father driving the scooter, his young kid standing in front of him, his wife sitting behind him holding a baby. And then a thought came to him whether one could conceive an affordable form of transport for such a family. Thus, by linking the brand of Nano with such a family, the Tata management committed a cardinal error. People are looking for status enhancement while buying a car in India. And this brand image did not help at all to achieve this goal. No wonder the brand did not do well at all. The lesson in decision making coming out from the study of Nano failure are clear. Successful decisions depend a great deal on the messaging to key stakeholders. Understand fully the psychological aspects of the people to whom you have to sell your idea. The actual reasons for your taking a decision may not have to be the same you give when you sell your decision. Simple errors of judgment in this area can doom an otherwise wonderful decision or idea. I hope you liked this presentation. Thank you.